Good morning, class. It's Tower Garden Tuesday, and today's lesson is learning about parts of plants, pollination, flowers. Now, remember, I just showed you how I self-pollinated the peppers in the garden, in the Tower Garden, and was unable to do the same for the tomatoes because no flowers have bloomed yet. Maybe they will bloom and I'll have a chance to do it, but so far it hasn't happened. And so we need to learn some terms and definition. Pollination is pollen grains on the anther of the stamen land on the stigma of the pistil. These are flower terms. Cross-pollination, when pollen is transferred to the stigma of another plant. Self-pollination, when pollen is transferred to the stigma of the same plant. Pollen, microscopic grains formed on a part of the flower called stamens that are needed to make a seed. It's like a little dust. Pollinators are animals such as bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, bats, and birds. And in case of the Tower Garden indoor, it's Miss Lori right now. From anthers to stigmas. Wind also helps pollinate flowers. Stamen is the male flower part that contains an anther with pollen. Anther is part of the stamen that holds the pollen. And the pistil is the female flower part with a stigma on top and an ovary where seeds are formed. Now, many children believe that the function of flowers is to smell nice and look beautiful. But flowers are responsible for generating seeds and fruit. So, how flowers make seeds and fruit. Pollination, part 1. Tiny pollen grains are formed on the part of the flower called stamens and are needed to make a seed. What is pollination? Pollination is the first step in the seed-making process. In this step, pollen is moved to where it is needed. Pollen grains on the anther of the stamen need to land on the stigma of the pistil. When pollen is transferred to the stigma of the same plant, it is called self-pollination. When pollen is transferred to the stigma of a different plant, it is called cross-pollination. Usually plants rely on animals or the wind to pollinate them. How would indoor Tower Garden flowers get pollinated? Well, that's where we use the nice little pipe cleaner. Flowers pollinated by insects are colored and scented. Why do you think that is so? To attract the bees and birds and butterflies. When pollinators suck up nectar in the pistil, they brush against the anthers and get pollen on their bodies. When they land on a flower, the pollen rubs off their bodies onto the stigma of the pistil. So pollen from the stamen sticks to a bee as it visits a flower to collect food, and then the bee travels to another plant of the same type, and pollen on the bee sticks to a pistil of a flower on the other plant. Wind-pollinated flowers usually have small petals, dull colors, and no scent. Why do you think this is so? Well, they don't need to have insects or animals being the one that has to be attracted to them in order to propagate. Their anthers usually hang out of the flowers so that the pollen grains can be blown by the wind more easily and have a higher chance of landing on a distant, large, feathery stigma. For example, Tower Garden cucumbers. When plants are grown indoors without wind or animal pollinators, the flowers need help to move the pollen. A person needs to transfer the pollen from the anthers onto the stigma of the female flower. In tower garden cucumbers, cucumber plants produce two kinds of flowers. One kind of flower produces pollen, it's a male. The other kind has a pistil and produces fruits and seeds, it's a female. And you look behind the blossom to see if there's a miniature cucumber, and if so, that is the flower with the stigma and the pistil. So a cucumber flower can be pollinated by hand. Use a small Q-tip to collect pollen from several anthers on the stamens of male flowers. Brush pollen onto the stigmas of the flowers with the miniature cucumbers. Watch the size of the little cucumber for a week after you pollinate the flower. What do you think will happen? In tower garden cucumbers. In tower garden tomatoes. Tomato flowers produce both pollen and a pistil on the same flower, but the pollen is held in a little cage, and without pollinators, a person is needed to help release it. So to pollinate tomatoes, just shake the plants gently. Where do you hope the pollen will land? What will you be able to observe in the next few weeks if you are successful? We are waiting for the little flowers. What happens after pollinization? Well, what happens after pollinization is that a pepper grows, or a tomato grows, or a fruit grows, and that is the embryo. And that embryo holds the seeds to the plant. Now, in nature, when we're not eating those seeds or plants or fruits, the seeds drop off and dry and drop into the ground, and then they plant another plant. They plant another plant, and another plant grows. And there you have your root, your stems, your leaves, your flowers, and it starts all over. So, have a wonderful day, Rayfield. Have a wonderful Rayfield day. Peppers, peppers, peppers. Our next lesson is on pollination. So what I have done is taken these pipe cleaners, and because there are no bees in the indoor garden, I have had to take the pipe cleaner and some of these flowers and transfer the pollen to other flowers that are open. And if those flowers are male or female flowers, they will cause a pepper to grow where the flower is if it's been fertilized. I don't see any on this side. Let's move over and pan over here. So this pipe cleaner is like the bee taking the pollen and putting it on another flower. And I don't know which flowers are the male flowers or the female flowers, but I am pollinating, self-pollinating the flowers so that they will grow a pepper. And those are the few that we have. And we'll get better at this as we go along, as we learn. Now, the tomatoes never got a flower. So I don't know if maybe this is a male plant and not a female plant. And next time I purchase tomatoes, I'll buy 2 tomato plants and then try to cross-pollinate the two plants, and that might work better. But as you can see, we really are starting to see some things happening in our tower garden with the peppers. Looks like there's going to be a pepper here, so I must have done something right. Here's a pepper that's ready to grow here. And there's another pepper getting ready to grow there. Can you see it? Here and there. So here we have it. And even on the cucumber, we have one flower, but you can see it's a little cucumber that's growing. So we're having some success experimenting. And here I am, Miss Lori, the bee. So thank you, and have a great day. Have a wonderful Rayfield day. Bye-bye.